Welcome to this Conversations on Groong episode. Today we'll talk about some periods in Armenian foreign policy, both in the lead up as well as following the 44-day war, and also about the current phase and forward strategy of the Srbazan Movement led by Archbishop Bagrat Galistanyan. We have with us Armenian diplomat and former Deputy Minister of Diaspora Affairs, Vahagn Melikian. Ambassador Melikian, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much for inviting me to this show. This is for the first time I'm with Groong, but Groong is familiar to me like years back.
We are very happy to have you. Ambassador, as this is your first time on our show, please tell us about your background, interests, and research a little bit.
Well, actually, I was born in Yerevan, 1967, graduated from those days, like Soviet period, there were no English schools, but I studied in the best English school in Yerevan, actually. And I remember lots of British delegations were visiting us, to learn how Soviets are teaching English to ordinary child. Well, after school, I entered the university, Yerevan State University, the Faculty of Oriental Studies, Arabic language. Then I served in the Soviet Army 2 years, and I was back. When I was back, it was 1987, and year after the Renaissance, I call it Renaissance of our nation began. I'm talking about the Karabakh movement. Those days, and our faculty was a pioneer, actually, of the movement, the youth phase of the movement. We and the State Conservatory of Yerevan, then other faculties and students joined us, but the faculty with its traditions, our Faculty of Oriental Studies, with its traditions, was leading the so-called movement of youth, or the consolidating of young people around the movement. So we were actively involved, and we were sleeping and waking up at the Opera House Square, we call it now Freedom Square, and we were preparing our exams there, and along with the movement full-time, 24/7, with our groups. Then 1991, I graduated from the faculty, and I entered the foreign ministry, the lowest level of one can imagine, even not a diplomat, but we call it a referent or an assistant. I started with consular section, then I became the aide or the assistant to the Minister of Foreign Affairs. Those days, Rafi Ovanesyan was the minister. So right. I worked with him 1 year. Then after his resignation, I continued my career in the secretariat. Then I went to the European department, and I've got my first appointment abroad. I was the first consul of the independent Armenia in Greece. So 2.5, a bit more years, I was there. Then I came back, and I was appointed the chief of secretariat, or chief of the office of the foreign minister. Then I served there for 2 years. In 1997, I was appointed as the first secretary of the Armenian embassy in Germany. 2 years we were in Bonn, and the capital moved to Berlin. You see how many historical...
Yeah, this is quite a history. That's right.
Then 1 year I was in Berlin. Then after that, I was appointed as Chief of State Protocol Service Agency in Armenia, which was covering the protocol services for all the highest officials, the president, prime minister, and foreign minister. Of course, 6 years I was leading the service. Then I was appointed as an ambassador of Armenia to the United Arab Emirates. Then consecutive years, I was covering also Qatar, Kuwait, and Bahrain from Abu Dhabi as a non-resident ambassador, because my resident was in Abu Dhabi. Then I came back in... No, I didn't. I didn't come back. I came back and they told me that you have to leave for Argentina. So I was appointed as an ambassador to Argentina with the residence in Buenos Aires, and consecutive years I was covering Uruguay, Paraguay, and Chile as well. Aftermath, after 2.5, a bit more years, I was back and I was appointed. That was my decision, actually, because frankly speaking, we decided that we're not going to serve abroad because it was a family decision, frankly speaking. And to be frank with you, I mean, it was my decision to talk to the president and tell him that I decided to stay in Armenia. And, if you're a diplomat and you are not moving to different countries, it's better to change your position. Mm-hmm. So the whole potential I had those 25 more years, I decided I offered my services in different directions. And as far as I'm a son of diaspora Armenian, actually, my father was born in Tehran, then he moved to Armenia late 50s, last century. So from my childhood, I have lots of connections with diaspora Armenians. So I saw myself those days in that I can put my potential, my diplomatic experience also that direction, like diaspora direction. So the president decided to appoint me as Deputy Minister of Diaspora Affairs. 3 years I was there. Then this so-called revolution began. So those days it was so smooth and it was so bright and it was so packaged with lovely colors and with lovely futures. So I decided to come back to my native place, let's say, my place, foreign ministry. And those days, Zorab Natsakanyan was appointed as foreign minister. With Zorab, we had more than 30 years of friendship as well. And he was my colleague. We started together like early 90s, as I told you, last century. And then, it's ridiculous. Yeah, guys, we're talking about last century and this century. So we kind of one like there, one like here.
Not only last century, but you can also say last millennium.
Last millennium. Yeah, you're right. You're completely right. So, he offered me the position of Secretary General of the Foreign Ministry. Actually, this is the highest position of Armenian diplomatic service, actually, because minister and the foreign minister and deputy minister, they're kind of political appointees. So Secretary General is the highest position in Armenian diplomatic service.
Actually, that was going to be my question, because I was researching the dates of your appointment and Zorab Natsakanyan. So I think he was appointed as minister, at least that was announced on May 12th. And then
you're
joined,
right. And after 10 days,
Secretary General on May 23, it says.
It was the eve of my birthday as well, because May 24 is my birthday. And it was kind of really nice gift for me.
So let me ask you a personal question, because, those were very euphoric days. I mean, you have so much history. So you were, from that day on, you were at the MFA until July 2021. So a lot of stuff happened between them. But when you initially accepted that position, what did you feel? What were your feelings and hopes like? Did you have any concern about what was going to come?
No, never. Like this, you pronounced the word euphoria. This is the exact word that we can use for those days. Thousands of Armenians were so much delighted to have this change. But what happened for the next month, let's say beginning or the mid of 2019, I was feeling that something is going on in a wrong way. And for the first time, let me say, that kind of euphoria, why we were so So glad, because for the first time they really appointed professional career diplomats on the posts, on the positions of the leadership of the foreign ministry. The guys, our colleagues, and all were our friends. We were walking the long way, like 30 plus years together. I mean, and for the first time, it was not political appointment, it was completely professional appointment, like Zorab and the other deputy ministers as well, me as a secretary general. So we started to work 24/7. I mean, devoted completely ourselves to the job. But unfortunately, it came out that it was completely false. It was, they were preparing the ground for a kind of isolating professionals, etc., etc. I'm not going deeper into the details. I mean, there are so many happenings and points that I don't want to actually touch upon. But if you are interested, you can just ask questions.
Definitely. For me, I mean, it's very interesting to learn what exactly happened. For instance, one of the biggest questions was that, Pashinyan was saying, we're not negotiating. There's nothing on the table. That was ridiculous because at one point, I think the Russian OSCE Minsk Group co-chairman had to write a correction to Pashinyan about that. But I mean, you were at the foreign ministry. So what was the course of the negotiations on Artsakh? If you can summarize it very, very quickly, from 2018 until, let's say, 2019 and 2020, especially when you said sometime in 2019, you felt like they were trying to isolate professionals. Was it related to the foreign policy things that Pashinyan was pushing? And did he have his favorite people through whom he was acting and so forth? We'd love to learn more if you whatever you can divulge.
Look, the first months, actually, we were completely involved with the summit of Francophonie in Armenia.
Right.
You remember that
those
October
days.
2018, yes. We had a summit of Francophonie that was not set up actually for by the current government, but the previous government. Actually, they started negotiations, and the decision was made that the summit capital will be in Yerevan. But when changes went on in 2018, by the way, your humble servant, I was appointed as a main coordinator for the summit, and it was very heavy months I faced. I entered the ministry the other day. I started to coordinate all the job. I mean, you can imagine what it means that tens of high-level delegations will be
Francophonie was a huge success.
Yeah, frankly, I'll be very frank, Asbed. Really, Francophonie was a huge success. Mm-hmm. Imagine that even the French guys, I mean, they were all, they are the leading state for the Francophonie. I mean, they were so much delighted. And Macron's evaluations, Trudeau's evaluations, and lots of other delegations. I mean, they told us that we never seen this kind of organization as we've seen in Armenia, because a huge team was working, as I told you, 24/7. Imagine that more than 600 volunteer youth were involved in organizational and logistics and all that stuff. I mean, it was a huge success, and it end of October 18. Then in December we had elections, if I'm not mistaken. It was December, yeah. And then the prime minister was appointed. Yes. Then we started completely to be involved in the process. Coming back to your question with Artsakh, let me tell you frankly, the Artsakh negotiations were always, 30 plus years in Armenia, were always the job for the narrow circle, actually. Mm-hmm. I was not involved in the delegations. I've never took part during the negotiations, these 30 plus years. The minister, a couple of guys, his counselor and assistants only. and of course the prime minister and a couple of others. So everybody knows that the negotiations were confidential, and it was decided like that by all the parties. So from time to time, leaks were going out, and but the full theme and the full content of negotiations was confidential.
Right.
So those days, I mean, when Pashinyan started these strange statements like, I'm starting from my page, starting from page 0 or white page, etc. It was really wrong, to my opinion, but a huge work was done, decades. You can't put it aside, I mean, for 1 second and tell that I'm starting from my point, from 0 page. This was strange. This was warning, actually. And we were warned, like a couple of times I had talks with Zorab Natsakanyan, and he was like, well, the process is going on. We are discussing the full package, etc., etc. But the exact content of the negotiations, I was not aware. So I can't tell you much about that. But as far as I know, I mean, they were talking to try to find different approaches, but actually the basic principles were on the use of force or threat of use of force, territorial integrity and self-determination of Nagorno-Karabakh people. The basis actually for the negotiations were there. It was on the table.
Yeah.
But in details, I can't tell you anything because I was not aware about that.
So here's another personal question. I mean, I remember I was in the US at the time on September 27. It was still September 26 there when the war started. And essentially, if you, us two guys, I mean, we are always following the news, copying, sharing, pasting. Our job essentially became 10 times more intensive because, we always, I feel like I'm always involved in news. But it was obviously very emotional. And I remember exactly sort of where I was sitting at my home. How did you feel? What was it like inside the foreign ministry at the time when the war started? And what can you tell us about maybe some of your own perceptions at the time?
Well, in a couple of sentences, I mean, it came as a shock, but it was kind of feeling in the atmosphere the last month before like 2-3 months before the war, that something is wrong and something is going on. The war was not in the air, actually, but the feeling that something is preparing was in the air, especially after the developments of July of that year. You remember, yeah? There was an incident on the border in Tavush region, the same Tavush where the Srbazan Movement began.
That's actually when the first episode of the Groong podcast, July 12th, that was when our podcast started. So we started with the Tavush fighting, and here we are, through the war and everything else.
Actually, we released it on that day, I think, but we didn't have any coverage of it because they were happening at the same time.
Frank, if I will be very frank with you, my perception was that that kind of incidents many times happened in different points of Armenian-Azeri borders, both western and eastern part, I mean the Nakhichevan border and Azeri border. Okay? And never the Armenian side put that kind of grandiose emphasis, like, look, guys, what we did there. I mean, when you're doing something, you have to be, kind of too much humble and not announce what happened there. I think what they did, you remember the ceremonies in Sardarabad?
Yeah, 70 medals.
Grandiose, more than 70 medals, etc. It was the most stupid step one could make. Okay? And I think it created a ground and made really furious Azerbaijan. So I think July incident was kind of prologue for the next developments that after 2.5 months we had, unfortunately, the beginning of 44-day war. Again and again, that was the most stupid thing one could do, okay? Because we acted really professionally. I mean, the guys there did professional job, but you have not to advertise what you're doing, okay? You can do it low profile without announcing or without beating your breast like you see what we have done there. Look, Azeris, we will beat you always, okay? And Opa. And as far as I know, it was the sole decision of the prime minister to make that kind of grandiose ceremony to show the people that look how strong is our army, and we are going to stand by always next to our people in Artsakh, etc., etc. That's stupid. Stupid things like many other stupid things that happened aftermath during the 44-day war, the post-war period, and then the other months, you know, all the developments better than me, I think.
Were you involved? I want to understand what your position...
I was coordinating the whole humanitarian aid coming from the logistics, the customs, and all that stuff.
Interesting, yeah.
Frankly speaking, one more thing I will tell, maybe I'm telling this for the first time, and Groong is the exception, actually. Look, the worst thing that I faced, and my colleagues as well, during the 44-day war, was the complete lack of information what is happening in the frontiers. We were kind of isolated from information. When I'm talking me and my colleagues, the high officials in the foreign ministry, not the minister, not the couple of guys like counselors and assistants, but I was completely not isolation. I'm talking about isolation from information. Well, it was 24/7 work, as I told you. Can you imagine what it means, the humanitarian aid coming from diaspora or abroad? I was really dived, actually, in that job. I mean, we were sleeping in the ministry.
Right.
1 hour back to home to have a shower and change the clothes and then come back again to the workplace.
So let me then also ask you about November 9 and 10. Some diplomats, notably Mr. Manucharyan, left the ministry. What made you stay at the ministry, and what was your position then?
It came as a big shock for all of us.
Yeah.
Nobody was expecting that that shock will happen. Can you imagine that, what I'm talking about? The evening that the hell evening that came on late night, 9th of November and 10th of November, it was a big shock for all of us. The minister gathered us and told that the prime minister signed already the trilateral statement. And what was in that statement? I mean, you can't imagine what happened with all of us. We were paralyzed. We were shocked because 2 or 3 days before, the discussions were going on like Shushi was under control of Azerbaijan. Nobody was believing that Shushi was under control of Azerbaijan. Can you imagine that?
They were even insulting the Artsakh officials who were saying that Shushi is under Azeri control. But that was partly because Pashinyan was also playing the game of, denial game. He was saying, the fights around Shushi are still continuing.
Yeah. We will win. We will win. All that 44 days that I don't want to give names, okay? But I hate those days, and I hate what was happening those days. And I mean, we were always like, we are winning, we are in the positions, we're still fighting. After Luyang, we're still fighting, etc., etc. All that blah, blah was like, all of a sudden it came that he already signed. I mean, can you imagine when Mnatsakanian gathered a narrow circle of the high officials in the foreign ministry and he was reading the text? And one had to see the eyes, I mean, of the participants. And nobody was even dreaming or accepting this, that today, talking about November 9th, terrible statement, the notorious statement, will be so good document for today with my evaluation. Can you imagine that? For those days, the document came as a shock and paralyzed all of us. And we were asking, are you going to talk about this paper? And he was like, he already signed it.
Wow.
Yeah, it was wow. And well, what made me to stay and continue? Look, it was the easiest step to resign and to run away. I was the one to try to talk to my colleagues and the minister as well, first Zorab and then Ara Ivasian, that the guys, the momentum and the importance of the diplomacy is so big, because if you dive into the paper, well, signed already, we were against, but it was signed. And if you are a cold-blooded diplomat, and you have to be a cold-blooded diplomat, to try to figure out what diplomacy can do. Through all my, I gave hundreds of interviews after I left my post as a Secretary General. I was telling that the beginning of the diplomacy is there, and diplomacy is a big tool for us. And if we work, even having a basis of that notorious document, the statement, actually, even though there were lots of opportunities to gain dividends and to try to de-escalate the situation and to try to take more firm, strong, clear position, even having the basis of that notorious document. But they choose the prime minister. Actually, he chose the wrong way. Actually. And which made me feel and then be sure that it was part of a program to give up with Artsakh. And then the decisions, the backstage decisions, and the oral decisions even were there. And those steps made us to leave the foreign ministry and to resign from there. Again and again, till the last day, I was trying to call on my colleagues and telling them, I mean, guys, let us work with team, and let us put the pressure to the government with our expertise. But they will deaf and dumb to their expertise, because what they were realizing, I'm talking about the narrow circle and the prime minister personal himself. I mean, they were, I think, they were following the realization of their program, which with it completely against our thinking, our analysis, and our expertise opinion.
So despite the fact that the November 9th statement spelled out that the forces will stay where they are, and Armenian forces at that time occupied positions in Zangilan up to 10 kilometers away from today's borders. One day Armenian forces simply pulled back tens of kilometers from Goris-Kapan or Zangilan, Pashinyan later explained, I think in December, that this was due to verbal agreements. Although there were allegations, and Hrant Bagration shared a copy of what appeared to be a written agreement, but they said that they denied it, or they did strategic ambiguity about that, and that pullback allowed Azerbaijanis to come so close that one day it was just like a small, 10-meter or whatever march or 50-meter march to the Goris-Kapan highway, where they occupied the highway and they closed it. And recently, Foreign Minister Ara Ayvazyan revealed that there indeed was a separate secret document signed by the defense minister at the time, Vahagn Melikian, which led to the giveaway of that strategic Goris-Kapan highway. So this was done in an interview to Azad Tun.
The foreign minister was not aware about that. That's true.
Yeah, he said the foreign minister was not aware of that.
He was absent, actually. He was not in Armenia, as far as I remember. But they didn't even put him on information about that. It was done very fast, and it was done without any agreement with the foreign ministry.
So when you say they, are you referring to just the prime minister, or is there like a very close circle, Armen Grigoryan?
Yeah, you're completely right. Yeah.
But the funny thing is that it was signed by Vahagn Melikian. If the November 10 statement is signed by the prime minister, why was this one signed by the defense minister?
For the point, like he is doing all the time. I mean, that the day we come and he will blame the defense ministry, as he's usually doing, blaming everybody for everything, but not him.
And I guess it's redundant to ask, why was it kept secret from the Armenian people?
Because you remember is the months. I mean, people were in deep apathy, and nobody was expecting that someone is going to give an order. Even there was a document to give an order to pull back. From the spots that Armenian soldier was standing. It was the wrongest decision. Actually, when you are negotiating, you have to have lots of bargaining chips. And those days, Armenia had bargaining chips, not that much, but Armenia had bargaining chips. To approach to not the solutions, but to the discussions with kind of reserved packages. They were following the pressure. They were following the threat coming from Baku. There were many backstage decisions that Armenian people was aware. Even the high-level officials in the foreign ministry were not aware about.
Let me go a little bit deeper now into the Artsakh conflict, which culminated in the war and what we have today, to understand what went wrong. Because that is always the question that we ask ourselves. I believe it would be fair to say that there are two main narratives regarding the history of the negotiations and how we ended up where we did. The first one, which is supported by the proponents of the first president, Levon Ter-Petrosyan, argued that Armenia should have taken the best deal that it could have gotten, and that deal was the 1997 step-by-step plan by the OSCE, and indeed Levon Ter-Petrosyan endorsed that. The argument was that after that, Azerbaijan was growing stronger, rearming, and financially becoming too large. So it was the best thing that we could have had. The second narrative is that Armenia was doing the best it could. And actually, the Artsakh conflict was being more or less managed. And only the policies of Pashinyan led to the outcome we had. Your perspective on these two hypotheses or narratives?
I would get the mixture of that too. Strong army with strong diplomacy. Those days we were strong, really, we were strong, and we were developing the army, and the involvement actually, and the budget that was going for the army was really not that much like Azerbaijan was investing, but still, for the small Armenia, it was good, and actually. The armament that were coming to Armenia, mostly the anti-air systems, etc. It was really good. Diplomacy was working good. Again, as I told you, I was never involved in negotiation process, because mostly the foreign minister, a couple of foreign ministers, previous foreign ministers, being the Barton Ospanyan or Edward Nalbandian and the others, I mean, they were involved with a couple of guys from their narrow circle, like assistant or a counselor, and of course, the presidents as well. Even the prime ministers, previous prime ministers, were not that much involved in the negotiation processes. I think the best solution would have been for us, again, a strong army, to develop the army, and to go out of that comfort zone called that we won the war. We never won the war. We won the battle. We won in the battlefield, but we never won the war. Okay? To put it along with the strong diplomacy, smart diplomacy, I think we would have come to the point that the outcome, even there was a war, the outcome wouldn't be like this terrible what we're facing today. And the processes of the mutual concessions that was the core of the negotiations as well. I mean, we would have been keeping our position much more stronger. At least today, we have been having Artsakh there with 150,000 inhabitants, or our compatriots there. Safe borders. Most probably the bargaining chips could have become, 5 regions, or the so-called buffer zone around the Nagorno-Karabakh Republic. But we lost all that stuff. We lost because of the stupid approach that I'm starting from my point. I will begin from the white paper. I will begin from position 0. That was the most stupid decision one could make.
We were talking yesterday, I believe, with scholar Arman Grigoryan.
Okay. We studied together with Arman in the same course.
He was Oriental Studies too. And he was saying that I think many people in the Levon Bedrossian circle say, including I think even Levon Zurabian, when we talked to him, he said that Serge Sarkisyan was not very serious about giving back those 5 territories, as painful as it is for all of us, because it is historic Armenian land, if you ask us. And I'm not saying that I support that, but when, one theory from essentially, I guess, realism is that you have to bargain with what you have. So if Armenia had bargained away those 5 territories, would we not have war again? And do you believe that Serge Sarkisyan was serious about that?
At a certain point, yes, definitely yes, because the narrative actually, aftermath, what we had as an information, actually Serge Sarkisyan was really serious for bargaining also that territory. And if you recall, even he stated that Agdam has never been Armenian motherland or part of Armenian motherland, okay? But the harsh criticism that came from the opposition and Nikol Pashinyan himself when he was part of the opposition, I think the fear of losing with that steps also was kind of a red rope, actually. And that's why the previous Armenian governments were like very tough on this issue, and concessions they were thinking, or the co-chairs were thinking they can do, was not actually keeping them in the power. And that's why Karabakh was always the main issue for different governments in Armenia. But coming back to Serge Sarkisyan, I think he was really serious. And if I'm not mistaken, to my information, he had also negotiations or discussions or confidential discussions with the Karabakh authorities as well about these issues, about telling them about the pressure, etc. And if I'm not mistaken, the Karabakh authorities were against of pulling back or against of giving up with the lands. If you ask me, I mean, what we could have done that we didn't do, I think we had to change the tracks. And look, you had a huge arsenal of diplomatic maneuvers. And what I will spot here was even that 5 regions, okay, surrounding Nagorno-Karabakh. Again, without going into details, because I don't know the details of the negotiations. What about if we could start with one region, okay, like we're pulling back from X region for 3 years or for 2 years, and we will try to see what is happening. I mean, to gain more confidence, and this we call in diplomacy the confidence building measures, okay? So step by step, we will start and then continue to see how frank is Azerbaijan in their narratives about the security of Armenian people in Nagorno-Karabakh, etc., etc. I mean, this would have been one of the solutions or approaches. It goes without saying that at certain point, guys, I mean, Armenia was going, of course, to pull back from that regions. And the fact is that those regions, I'm not talking about Kelbajar and I'm not talking about Lachin, okay? Lachin and Kelbajar was always out of any discussions.
That's why it was always 5 regions and then 2 more regions and then, yeah.
That was the so-called Lavrov plan, actually, yeah.
That's right. That's right. So you're talking about maybe Fizuli or something like that.
Fizuli, Zangelan, and what else? What was there?
Jibrail.
Yeah, you're right. But they didn't do that. I don't know why. Why they were so firm. Or maybe, I don't know, again, it's not a fact, but maybe something wrong was going on in between the co-chairs. Why? Because it's not a secret that each and every one of them was following their interests, okay? The co-chairs were 3 members of Security Council in the UN. Russia was there, US was there, and France as the representation of the Europe, or we today call it collective West, they were completely and fully involved in that process, okay? But at certain point when you passed you've done a huge job, and I assure you guys, the negotiations was quite serious. I mean, it was not a way like we're negotiating for the sake of negotiations, okay? Lots of different approaches and different packages were being discussed. But at certain point coming and saying that, stop, this is the final spot, we close that and we start the negotiation from our white paper, from our 0 point. Again and again, I'm repeating it for the 5th time maybe during this interview. That was the most stupid way to approach to the things. But when the developments later happened, we understood that that was the part of the program, actually. The part of a program. I'm definitely sure that the program was there on the table, and Nikol Pashinyan was chosen the one to realize that program. Anti-Armenian, anti-national, and anti-state decision or program.
That's very interesting because we know that Pashinyan, for instance, in all the way back in 2001, was writing articles that we should essentially give a corridor, east-west corridor for the Turks. And yes, it is against Russia's interests and it is against China's interests, but it is not against Armenia's interests. So definitely, at least he was amenable to that idea that Armenia should dump Russia as a partner, right? So when you mentioned this program, do you believe that essentially this phase shift in terms of geopolitical poles was part of that program. What's happening today?
Hovik, definitely yes. Short and sweet. That's why. That's why he was chosen.
But who chose him? Who are the rest of this gang that came here? I mean, I think that's it's amazing that we as an entire nation put our trust in this one person. I mean, I have used many different words, but traitor has been one of them. But in reality, what you're saying is essentially state treason, because you are giving up your own land. You're giving up something that you're bound constitutionally to protect.
Yeah, without any basics, like manipulating each and everyone around, manipulating all the time, and threatening your own people with war. Can you imagine that? Can you imagine a state with the head or with the president or with the prime minister to threat his own people with war as an alternative?
Right, and at the same time saying we have no way of winning this war.
Well, yeah, of course. When it comes to the generals, when it comes to the diplomats, everybody is wrong. Everybody has mistakes, except him. He's not he's blaming everyone, but not him. That's his. Actually, that's his stance. So that he's always been there. He's cheating and manipulating 24/7.
You are listening to the Groong podcast with our guest ambassador, Vahagn Melikian. Hovik, let's take a moment to thank our listeners who have contributed by becoming sustaining members to our podcast. Thank you so much for your support. And if you haven't done so yet, please go to podcast.groong.org/donate and become a member.
In fact, folks, do what Asbed said or don't do that, because for just 2 seconds of your time, you don't have to give us a donation. And here's what I'll explain. I think that, comments and feedback in terms of likes and sharing is very important. So please, in lieu of a donation, if maybe you can't afford it, or you want to do us some extra favors, please consider going to the comment section of this show on YouTube and adding a comment what you thought about today. We're not asking you for positive or negative. Just honestly what your thoughts are, anything we can do to improve. We're doing our best to get you different people. And here's Ambassador Melikian, who is at the forefront of the Srbazan Movement, advising Bagrat Srbazan on foreign policy, and part of the a founding member of the Pan-Armenian Diplomatic Council. Someone I think that you should hear out, and let us know if that's a good idea or not, or what your idea of a good guest is. Thank you very much.
Yeah. So assuming that you are actually going to go to our YouTube videos page and basically leave a comment, we would like to hear what you think about these shows. Not only this one, but all the other shows that we have produced. This is going to be show 351 or 352 or something like that. We would love to hear what you think of our work. Okay, back again to our conversations on Groong with Ambassador Vahagn Melikian.
Okay, there's one more question, I guess, in the background. It has to do with the plan that you talked about. But, Erdogan recently boasted to Israel that they could enter Israel just like they did Artsakh.
Mm-hmm.
So let's talk about how important Turkey was to Azerbaijan's victory. Again, realizing that maybe you weren't privy to all those discussions, but now you are outside. And we know that there are many ways that Turkey was involved during the war. Both of our guests that we recently had, Artur Martirosyan and Arman Grigoryan, said that they were confident that Turkey was the chief party responsible for planning the war. There were reports that Turkish special forces were participating in the war. There were reports that at least one part of the war was being managed and coordinated from an AWACS aircraft that we all saw was flying around the border during the war. Turkey had generals stationed in Azerbaijan. And last but not least, and this is the one that I always take every opportunity to bring up, is that Turkey, as a NATO member, has access to NATO intelligence and imagery, hundreds of satellites. They call this, there's this joint program where they share intelligence. So can someone say to me that Turkey, as a NATO member, didn't take advantage of this intelligence and didn't pass this intelligence to Azerbaijan, given that there are some reports that in the first 15 minutes of the war, all of our air defense targets, all of our critical military targets were essentially obliterated. So in your assessment, maybe you can say if this is professional assessment or this is personal assessment, how critical, how important was Turkey's involvement in the war for the outcome that it had? And could Turkey's involvement be prevented in any way?
Look, I will answer the question in a very short way that had all the answers to all the spots you raised. Okay, Hovik John, if not Turkey, Azerbaijan was not going to win this war. Never. Okay. Fact: the first 5 days of the war, after 4 or 5 days, Turkey got fully involved. Taking the huge lead in general staff in Azerbaijan. And you're talking about AWACS planes and all that stuff. When Turkey was completely involved there, then it went down. If not Turkey, again, I'm repeating, I'm quite sure, I'm 150% sure, if not Turkey, well, it was going to be a furious war, maybe with lots of losses, but the outcome will not be like this, what we have today. And if not Turkey, Azerbaijan was not going to win that war. Never.
And probably would never have started the war either.
Take it from your minds. Never.
So then, at which point in history of the conflict did the threat of Turkey being involved become a strong likelihood? Was that being considered by Armenian leaders, or did it come all of a sudden?
No, it didn't come all of a sudden. I'll be very frank. It didn't come all of a sudden. We were always sure that Turkey in some way will be definitely backing up Azerbaijan, but not in a way that came out during the 44-day war. And it's not an exaggeration.
Mm-hmm.
But to stand, can you imagine to stand with this power like Turkey and Azerbaijan and Pakistan also was kind of involved, and mercenaries as well. 44 days, you have not a single right to blame the Armenian soldier. Our lion-hearted guys were there always, till the end, the ordinary soldier. I'm not talking about leadership that put them aside, okay? But the soldier is making his decision. Everybody knows that, okay? So the guys were there, and they stand for their motherland. Again, I'm repeating, without Turkish full involvement, this war was not going to be won by Azerbaijan.
One of the arguments that Pashinyan says is that by the time he came, everything was all in motion, and there was nothing he could do to change things, including, I'm assuming, Turkey's willingness to be involved.
Hovik, sorry for interruption, okay? The narratives that he brought into life and the harsh provocations, meaningful provocations that he did brought us to the war, actually. Why he was doing, asking you, and everybody could ask him why he was doing that, why he was provoking all the time, why he was doing that. You know the previous presidents. Tell me one president, tell me or recall any statements if there was a statement that Karabakh is Armenia. Everybody knows that. Why he made loud statements about that. During the meeting, during the manifestation, during the gathering in the heart of Stepanakert, you are standing and announcing that Karabakh is Armenia? You're changing the whole narrative. Armenia was always like, we are in favor of self-determination of our compatriots in Karabakh, okay? We are in favor to find out the status, to solve the status issue, the core of the negotiations. And all of a sudden, you are stating that Karabakh is Armenia. Well, 10 million Armenians know that Karabakh is Armenian. Why the leader of Armenia is stating, why talking loudly about that? Can you tell me what a stupid statement he made? And actually, it opened the way to the war. And you were asking me, how we come to the spot in a very easy way, provoking the war.
Okay.
And why you didn't start negotiations with your allies, to put an end to the war.
Right.
And there were so many opportunities.
When after 4 or 5 days, when you saw that the Turkish involvement was completely there in front of the eyes of the so-called collective West, with their toothless statements during the 44-day period, why you didn't stop the war? Why you couldn't reach your allies and request them to put all their powers they can to stop the war? You didn't do that. You were always manipulating, writing letters referring to the wrong articles of your agreements, the CSTO, etc., etc. I'm not going deeper into the details. You didn't do anything to stop the war. You didn't use your tools, your diplomatic tools to stop the war, your military tools to stop the war. But in fact, Zorab Mnatsakanian 3 or 4 times negotiated the ceasefire. He did that. The agreement was there. But of course, Azeris and Turks, were always violating right the next day after. Because they saw that they can do that. This is the fact.
Ambassador, one of the main developments responsible for all these tectonic shifts in the region was the growing conflict between Russia and the collective West. Today, with the disasters that have happened in Georgia and Ukraine clear to all of us, the West is now encouraging Pashinyan to reorient Armenia towards the West.
Yes.
Does a Western orientation provide greater benefits than, for example, associating with the Eurasian Economic Union, Russia, etc.? What is Pashinyan's cost-benefit analysis that is leading him to reorient Armenia towards the West with such zeal?
To stay on power, because he sees the only way of his personal security in staying power. And he is ready to do anything. Anything, Asbedjan. You can't even imagine how terrible is he. He is ready to sacrifice anything, but to stay in power. The decisions they are making, shifting the vectors and changing the vectors, ignoring the situational allies and natural allies. To this point, is the stupid thing one can do. But intentionally, they are doing that because he understands that this is the only way to keep him on power.
Right.
Of course, geopolitics is there. Of course, the interests are there. Of course, the change of world order is there, but not for Armenia. They think Russia is completely and fully involved with Ukraine. At certain point, Asbed, this war is going to be stopped. Yes,
that's right.
And they start to talk about that. Even Zelensky, if I'm not mistaken, yesterday, he announced that they are ready to talk with Russia without any preconditions. They're not putting a precondition to pull back from the so-called territories that belong to Ukraine.
Ambassador Melikian, you said that he's conducting the policies that he is in order to stay in power.
Yep.
But we have seen that his team is full of people whose lifelong, it seems, profession, job at least, has been funded by the West, and he himself has expressed anti-Russian positions. So is it really his hands are tied because he has to stay in power, or is it more of a deep conviction that Armenia's future is with the West?
Come on,
people say it's a pivot, but pivot means that at one point he had one direction, and now he's going in another direction. But to me, it seemed like he was always trying to get Armenia out of Russia's orbit.
Yeah, you're right. You're right. You're completely right. I mean, but there are no excuses in the foreign relations, you know. At certain point, I'm quite sure he will jump to the Russians and tell them, I mean, look, guys, I was wrong, etc., etc. But there are not excuses in the foreign policies. I mean, he behaved himself. Of course, look, let me be very frank, Hovik Jan. We have lots of questions to Russians, okay? Lots of them. But to get the answers for that questions, you have at least to sit down and talk. You have to continue the dialogue. You have to put all the warnings on the table. You have to be very frank with your allies, especially the ally like Russia is. And everybody knows the situation going on in the front with Ukraine and in Russia as well. And how you have to behave when you have an ally and you're cheating your ally or giving up with him and not talking to him. Because in the West, they assured you that the war is going to be won by the West, by the collective West, or by Ukraine. Forget about it. That means you don't know what Russia is in depth. They're not going to give up, never, okay? And the consolidation that they have inside Russia, more than 70-80% of the support, this is the Russian mentality. You don't know the Russian mentality. And without knowing them, you're losing your professionals, you're isolating all the educated guys, you are the sole authority in your country, you are the one to make all the decisions. I mean, this is authoritarian approach. And you are selling your democracy or so-called democracy to the West. What the West needs is Russia out of the region. They don't care about Armenian people, about Armenia. This became because of the stance, because of the adopted policy of this government. Armenia lost the subjectivity. Armenia is not a subject, it's an object, it's a tool in the hands of big states, I mean, to pull out Russia from the region. Turkey is there definitely with its pan-Turkish plans, and lots of other states are there. And the main thing was to kind of open a second front with Russia in the south. And all those corridors we're talking about, whether it will be under Russian control or under West control, etc., they are pushing all these geopolitical interests. And Armenia is not there. It's just a territory with inhabitants. I'm talking this very seriously and unfortunately, okay? Unfortunately. We are in a hell, guys. We are in a hell. We are in a hell of losing Armenia's statehood, and this is existential to the state, you know? Mm-hmm. This takes you to the point of becoming a non-vital state, a service state. You will serve the communications and all that stuff. And as Pashinyan is telling, there is no need to struggle, there is no need to fight. You just enjoy your life. And Europe will open the doors, and a peasant in a faraway village will come and visit, will take the plane and visit Rome, Paris, and all this stuff with no visas. I mean, it's ridiculous. It's stupid.
Yeah. Ambassador, when it comes to talks between Pashinyan and Aliyev, according to Pashinyan, 90% of the content of the so-called peace treaty has been agreed upon in the US a few weeks ago. State Department officials said that the sides must be ready for tough compromises about a month ago on July 10th to bring the deal to a close. They're very adamant to bring this deal to a close.
Because they have elections.
Yes, they do. But we haven't seen any compromises, right? Only one-sided concessions by Armenia. What are the U.S. officials thinking about when they continue to press for, quote unquote, tough compromises? And they say this from both sides. Does the U.S. have any leverage to bring Azerbaijan to make any compromises in this?
No.
So what are they talking about?
They're talking about Armenia. They're talking about constitution, most probably. I mean, look, in the international affairs, there is a famous proverb that says nothing is agreed until everything is agreed. You're talking about 80-90%. Even if 99% it will be agreed, again, that 1% means a lot. So according to the statements that on a daily basis we hear from Baku and Ankara, I mean, by the way, both of them, they are playing excellent game. Ankara is a good cop and Baku is a bad cop, okay?
Right, that's right.
So what we hear on daily basis is change your constitution. This will be another step for that. Risky, of course, risky. Pashinyan's rating is sliding down terribly. He knows about that, and he can go with the referendum. Maybe with manipulating, he will start to think about the runoff or new elections, actually, and he will bring the package fully with elections and referendum and this, again, stupid narrative that we are going to Europe and we will start negotiations on the membership. You know, guys, that in Europe, they are smiling and laughing on that. I mean, it's really ridiculous. Nobody is going to accept you to the European family. Nobody.
We are very far from becoming EU members.
One of the reasons why I thought about talking to you, Ambassador Melikian, is because of the Srbazan Movement, which started in Tavush and moved to Yerevan. It has generated a lot of social movement. We have seen some of the largest crowds on the streets since 2018. Initially, Srbazan gave various deadlines to Pashinyan. First, it was 1 hour, then a week. But if success is to be measured by the initial goal, which was to unseat Pashinyan, then I think it's safe to say that the movement has not been successful so far. And after the June 12 crackdown by the Armenian government, the protest movement seems to have taken a step back to regroup. We know that currently most of the government is on vacation anyway. The parliament has adjourned for the month of August. But we see the Srbazan actively working, meeting different groups of people in regions and Yerevan. But the question still remains to me, what is going to happen next? And more importantly, what is the reason that the movement was not able to achieve success so far?
Look, I mean, what Srbazan did, I mean, he did the best he could, and nobody was even expecting that the movement will take that snowball effect. And actually, it took because, I mean, if you remember the May 9th manifestation in the Republic Square, more than 80,000 our compatriots were gathered there in the square. But as usually happened, and Armenia is not the only case, I mean, there are so many parties, groupings, individuals involved that could be also wrong steps or wrong decisions or wrong approaches or wrong point of views. I mean, the clash of that decisions brought to the point that the regrouping or reorganizing the movement is in strongly need. Me personally, I'm completely involved in the coordination bodies of the movement, so I know it from inside as well, that now the active process is on, We are preparing, we are counting, we are trying to find out all the wrong steps and solutions, trying to coordinate or brought all the solutions together in one mixture and try to take the golden middle from that. Actually, what we have, the process had a kind of awakening part, like people were sleeping, and this indifference that we have throughout Armenia, I think people, not only in Yerevan, because Yerevan has been usually the opposition to all that part, and given the fact also the outcome of the elections in the municipality, I mean, what they had 9% only during the elections, and they had kind of a mere spot that they passed, because I mean the danger is there that they will not make it, but they did actually with a mere passes. So Yerevan is opposition, but what interesting is happening in the regions were always traditionally backing up the current or incumbent authorities. The same is going on with Pashinyan. But lots of circles are waking up. And this is the most important part. They started to understand that behind the nice words, Pashinyan is always circulating and manipulating with that words, there are so many dangerous minds. So that's why I hope at certain point more circles will understand, and this snowball effect will again restart, and the people will stand up for their rights, for their future, for the truth, and of course for their motherland, and of course for the national agenda that is completely vanished in Pashinyan's policy. This is the case, actually. So I think September is the beginning of work season, and everybody will be back from the holidays, and we will see. I mean, I very much hope that at a certain point people will stood up and raise their voice that Pashinyan has to leave the position. Sooner, the better.
Ambassador, what do you think is needed at that time? Do you need lots of people on the streets, or do you need them for a longer time? What is it that's needed?
Both, Asbed John. We need both. We need everything. We need lots of people. We need pressure to put on different circles.
Is the organization planning the logistics for keeping 50,000 or 100,000 people on the street for 1 or 2 weeks until the government comes down?
That could be one of the options. I'm not going to open up a bit the strategic part or roadmap, actually. I don't want to do that, because still the discussions are there, and we're trying to find optional ways how we can solve the situation. Solution will be political, definitely, and Srbazan himself also stated about that. But let us look at this movement aspect. Everybody is looking, or everybody is talking about the movement from a classic point of view, from ordinary point of view. But we have to look at the movement. It's a kind of non-ordinary movement. It has nothing to do with classic movements, classic manifestations, etc. The core of the movement is the truth. The truth and lie. One side is the truth, the other side is lie. Pashinyan is lying on daily basis. We are talking about the truth. And people should understand. People got fatigue. I mean, they are really, they don't want to listen about what Pashinyan is manipulating. He's manipulating about this war issue. He's telling his people, if I'm not going to follow these steps, then the war will begin again. And it's totally terrorizing all the circles. I mean, the business representatives, the state institutions, terrorizing each and everyone.
Yeah.
Each and the fear is there, definitely, because let me tell you, Asbed John, frankly, it's completely different in the regions. I mean, they are living with their families, big families, okay? And even a single member of the family is part of the state institution, and it's not an ideology. He can hate, but be part of the institution. So they are going to keep silence because this guy is kind of feeding the family or something. Money plays a huge role in all those directions, a huge role, and money is there. And they are spending all the time. 6 years, guys, 6 years, Armenia's national debt crossed the $12 billion. He came to the power with the debt $4.5 billion. Within 6 years, we crossed the line of $12 billion. Can you imagine that this is the burden that is on the shoulders of our kids?
Yeah, every newborn in Armenia has $4,000 of debt.
Completely right, Hovik.
Ambassador Melikian, so upon the urging of Belgrade Srbazan, the Pan-Armenian Diplomatic Council was founded by you and other diplomats. Can you tell us the purpose of this council? How coupled is it with the movement?
A small correction, Hovik. We were established before the beginning of the movement, and it was a simple coincidence, because there is a wrong thinking or wrong approach that the council has been established because of the movement. It has nothing to do. It was just a simple coincidence. Well, from the first days on, we were the first or the second to announce that Pan-Armenian Diplomatic Council is completely supporting the Srbazan movement. Tavush in favor of motherland, then it became to Srbazan Baikar and Srbazan movement. So we are completely involved. We are completely supporting Srbazan, and we are considered like his diplomatic team.
I will link this in our show notes, but on May 12th, your team or the Pan-Armenian Diplomatic Council issued a so-called foreign policy plan.
Roadmap, yeah.
Roadmap, yes. I mean, it's too long for us to cover here probably, but I wanted to ask if you could summarize it in your own words. How is it different from what Pashinyan is doing today?
Yeah, first of all, the big emphasis goes for national agenda. We are lacking national agenda. So one of the most important or the core articles there is the movement is without antis. We are not anti-Russian. We are not anti-Turkey. We are not anti-Iran or anti-West. We are pro-Armenian, pro-state. And what we have to do is to follow our national interest with diplomatic tools, with all the even small opportunities that we still have, and diplomacy still has opportunities there. So we can work it out, a roadmap in details, and it's still there. It's on the table. Actually, the text is much more bigger rather than I stated it from the stage. We know better how we can do that. Okay, we have to talk with our allies. We have to talk with our situational allies, and the only thing we have to do is to, first of all, to de-escalate the situation. Nobody says that we have to stop the so-called demarcation and delimitation process. It will be definitely continued. We are very keen to bring peace to the region. Our narratives have nothing to do with the war, but has definitely deeply do with the peace. We will bring our peace agenda, and we will start to talk, first of all, to our natural allies and our situational allies. And there are lots of them. Because you better talked about it like this, all these tectonic movements that are going on in the world, by the way, very dangerous ones, because the main spots are so near to us and to our region. whether it will be Lebanon, whether it will be Gaza, whether it will be Ukraine, whether it will be Iran, and all the other points. Okay, so Armenia has to reshift its policy, mattering not the vectors or changing the vectors, but bringing the real national agenda with our national interest that should be coordinated with the national interests of the bigger players, whether it will be in the north, in the south, in the west, or in the east. Okay, so this is the main approach that we are following now.
That's very important. And one of the reasons why I wanted to have this discussion in English, and it's obvious that your team is advising the Srbazan on foreign policy.
By the way, we are having also meetings with the representatives of diplomatic corps accredited in Armenia. We had lots of meetings with different ambassadors. We talked about, first of all, the Pan-Armenian Diplomatic Council, why it has been established, the aims and the approaches and the vision actually of the council to bring alternate foreign agenda, which will never hurt West, which will never hurt East, which will never hurt North or South, okay? But it has really something to do with coordinating or balancing or bringing to the point that the status quo of the balanced status quo will be brought back to the region. The balance has been violated, actually. That's why the war began. Unilateral concessions are there, whether it will be threat, use of force, etc., etc. Look, during the meetings, we are talking also about the Srbazan movement. We are passing in details what the movement is about. I mean, because the narrative that the authorities brought is that the movement is financed by Russia,
and not just the authorities. Specifically, let me put it this way: the question that was raised was, should Armenia leave the CSTO? And I think even the most, I think even from a European viewpoint, if you think that Armenia should remain in the CSTO, then you're pro-Russian. Is that a normal viewpoint to have, or is that accurate viewpoint to have? How would you address that?
Trivial, it's simple, and it's ridiculous. It's not serious. I'm not going to talk about not serious things. It's not serious. You're talking with the person who is completely involved, and if you don't mind, I'm giving you insider information. Actually, I'm inside that.
I'm hoping that journalist that I had an argument with is listening to us right now. But go ahead and please continue.
We are ready to explain that it is not pro or con. Okay. It's about Armenia. It's about existence of Armenia. It's existential movement for Armenians, for all Armenians, for diaspora Armenians as well, for 7 million Armenians throughout the world. It's for our future, guys. I mean, one has to understand that the way that was chosen by the incumbent government, I mean, it's not the way to the dead end. It's the way to lose everything. Armenia will be vanished from the map. One has to understand this, and that's why this movement is there. And it's not easy for Archbishop, I mean, Archbishop was calmly sitting in Tavush region, enjoying, the supports and doing his service. He came out because of the situation, because of the harsh and this tough situation we are facing today. And we, as diplomats, we saw tomorrow as well. We can predict. And unfortunately, again and again, Hovik John, unfortunately, all our predictions came to life 2.5 years back. We were talking about today. And not predicting, we were sure if he will continue this policy, we will face the danger. What is happening today? What happened in Tavush? What is happening in Armenia? This is not still a movie. This is pre-movie stuff. The movie will begin tomorrow. And it's not like an ordinary movie. It will be serious. The serial, that we will face, the hell is coming still. Can you imagine?
Let this be my last question to a skeptic who says that in today's climate, in today's this West versus Russian confrontation, it's very difficult to stay balanced and have this complementary policy. So how can you convince, what's like specific examples can you bring that where Armenia can achieve balanced foreign policy and not take one side versus another?
That's what diplomacy is for. You using situational tools, using smart tools, using balanced tools, using what you have. And I'm quite sure. Still, we have interests that can be coordinated with the interests of our allies without hurting the interests of our anti-allies. Let's say, like the word, like if you prefer West, then go with the West. Nobody is telling that we have to completely cut off with the West and go with Russians a long way. Look, years back, this policy of complementary was there. Yes or not?
Yes.
We had very good relations with Europe, and we had very good relations with Russia. Now you will tell me, no, it's not the case because the situation changed. West is completely anti-Russian. West has been always completely anti-Russian. Always. Starting from the collapse of the Soviet Union. Today, the world is changing. Okay, we're not coming back to the world order, the old world order. But there is going to be a new world order, yes? Multipolar world order. China is there, India is there, Turkey is playing completely another role, globally also trying to become a global player as well. Look, the developments going on in Gaza, in Israel, the developments in Africa, actually, in Latin America. Everything is changing. Everything is changing, and the states are following to their future national interests, trying to find out whether it will be a satellite, whether it will be an ally, a situational ally, etc., etc. Except one state in the world, Armenia. Armenia is doing nothing for their future positionings. This is the case.
All right. Let's leave it there for today.
Asbedjan is too late for you there in the United States.
It's never too late for me, and it's never too late for Armenians. When you were saying those things, Ambassador, I was thinking about former Foreign Minister Vardan Oskanian, who says, even now, there are ways out of this terrible morass. But we need the right people to work that situation. And that's what we don't have.
You're right.
Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, guys. Thank you.
We hope to talk to you again.
Thank you, Ambassador, and thank you for giving us so much of your time, twice as much as we asked for.
Thank you, Hovik. Appreciate it. Wish you all the best and success to Groong. And
thank you so much.
Stay firm, be with us, and when we will be together, that's what everybody is fearing, that this togetherness, actually, and the solidarity is the threat to certain states. Unfortunately, we Armenians don't understand that the consolidation or the reconciliation, another core issue of this Srbazan movement, is the most important thing. We Armenians have to lean on us, exceptionally on us, without begging anything from the others. If you lean on you, if you are consolidated and reconciliated, then the bigger players would definitely talk to you as well.
And on that optimistic note, I think it's time to close our show.
Okay, Hovik, thank you very much, and wish you all the best, guys.
Barikisher.
Barikisher.
For me. That concludes this Conversations on Groong episode, and we hope you found it useful. As always, we invite your feedback. You can find us on most social media and podcast platforms or our website, groong.org. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel on YouTube, like our pages, and follow us on social media. On behalf of everyone in this episode, we wish you a good week. Thanks for listening, and we'll talk to you soon.